I guess I'd say welcome to Kevin Unscripted, but this is actually a repeat guest and recording. And I'm just going to do a little bit of a bio, if you don't mind. And the thing about it is, it's very difficult to try and get a bit of an accurate description of who you are and your history. There's not much really out there. So I'm going to go through what I have. And then at the end of it all, let me know if I got it spot on or there's areas that might not be quite as accurate as maybe they should be. So here we go. Actually, first, I think what I would outline just for the viewers, I mean, the viewers that I have, they range wildly. But in your bio, there's a couple terminologies I thought I would just try and outline right now before we get into it. And first is pathologist. Pathologist. How do you pronounce that?
Pathologist.
Pathologist. Oh, my bad. So as a medical healthcare provider, a scientist who studies the causes and effects of diseases, especially one who examines laboratory samples of body tissue for diagnostic or forensic purposes, or who examines bodies and body tissues and performing test labs. A pathologist helps other healthcare providers reach diagnosis and is an important member of the treatment team. So that does that sound like an accurate description?
I could shorten that to we're the doctor's doctor.
You're the doctor's doctor. Well, actually, that's very well said. That makes sense.
They come to us for the answers that they take credit for.
Oh, really? Oh, fair enough. Well, why don't I outline your history here? You, Dr. Hodkinson, is a distinguished medical doctor and pathologist with over 50 years of experience in his field. He's recognized by the Court of Queen's Bench in Alberta and is an expert in pathology and is currently in good standing with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta. Dr. Hodkinson obtained his medical degree from the prestigious University of Cambridge in the UK and has held various leadership positions in the healthcare industry, including as a consultant in pathology and medical laboratory management. He also served as the CEO of a large biotechnology company and specialized in developing and manufacturing assays and biotechnology products. Dr. Hodkinson is a fellow of the Royal College and Physicians of Surgeons of Canada, the College of American Pathology, or Pathologists, and American Society for Clinical Pathology. He's also a member of the Examination Committee for the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada and an external advisor for the College of American Pathologists. Beyond his medical expertise, Dr. Hodkinson, I'm butchering it, sorry, is also an accomplished entrepreneur, having founded and managed several successful companies in biotechnology industry, and has provided expert testimony in legal cases related to medical malpractice and product liability. Despite facing intense pressure and criticism, Dr. Hodkinson has remained steadfast in his beliefs and his commitment to speaking out on issues that he believes are critical to the health and well-being of society. In particular, he has been a vocal critic of certain aspects of the pandemic response and has used his platform to raise awareness and advocate for alternative approaches. Dr. Hodkinson's courage and conviction have come at a significant personal risk, and he has faced backlash and even threats of his career. However, he remains undeterred in his mission to promote truth and transparency in healthcare and public policy. His unwavering commitment to his principles is an inspiration to us all, and an honor to have him as a guest on Kevin Unscripted. How's that?
Pardon me. Kevin, I'd like to emphasize a couple of things there.
Sure.
If I may.
Yeah.
The first one is the word currently. Member of the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons in good standing. I am, of course, under attack because of spreading misinformation. That attack is ongoing. unresolved. I'm still a practicing physician, but that's been going on for 2 years now. The problem is they won't tell me what information I'm missing.
Misinformation, but I guess from whose point of view?
The other correction is that I am no longer a fellow of the American College of Pathologists. They chose to get rid of me, along with Ryan Cole. I'm in good company, again, for spreading misinformation. I'd also like to add one thing that was missed in that long introduction, and that's something I'm very proud of. I was for many years the president of Action on Smoking and Health.
Oh, okay.
I played a central role nationally in taking on the tobacco industry with their predatory marketing practices, and we eventually had a number of wins. The smoke-free places, for example, smoke-free planes, restaurants, etc. That came directly out of the activities of people like me, by no means alone. Gar Mahood in Toronto was the national leader. And I'm very proud of that involvement. And it actually taught me how to take on Big Pharma, because Big Tobacco and Big Pharma are
very closely related.
Joined at the hip, you know.
So when you were taking on tobacco, that was probably in the mid-2000s then, roughly?
Oh no, that would have been earlier. That would have been that would have been in the 1980s.
Oh wow! So you have quite a bit of experience trying to make, I guess, industry corrections when it comes to the tobacco industry and now pharmaceutical.
Sure, they both sell poisons. That's the connecting factor. Big Pharma sells poisons. Big Tobacco sells poisons.
Well, the perception now with tobacco, of course, is softened, where it did go from something that wasn't really a health issue to now where, of course, now it is. Not so much with pharmaceutical. You're in the middle of that battle right now, I would assume, and probably why you're taking so much of the backlash as far as misinformation. Where did that start? I mean, with that whole, I guess, battle for you with Big Pharma, was that kind of coinciding with tobacco or? No,
there was a hiatus in my activities following my involvement with Big Tobacco until COVID came along. The realization of the involvement of Big Pharma came a little bit later than the mandates. What people have to appreciate is that in medicine, mainstream medicine, traditional medicine, of which I've had academic positions, I've done lots of leadership roles. I am no pushover when it comes to evidence-based medicine. I have no time for quacks. Conspiracy theorists, etc., etc. In traditional medicine, we used to have an implicit trust in the organizations that managed the approval of products, pharmaceuticals, pills, for treating widespread medical conditions. In clinical medicine, we cure virtually nothing. Surgery cuts things out. Antibiotics get rid of infections. But the vast majority of conditions that physicians see patients for, arthritis, diabetes, hypertension, depression, etc., 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 we cure none of it. We give people a thing called pills. Now, what people have to realize is that all those pills that are given to you on that little piece of paper, when they're giving you a prescription, they know something that you don't know. And that is that pills are poisons if in the right dose.
Mm.
And if the evidence for efficacy has not been performed thoroughly. What I'm really talking about here is the corruption of big pharma. Greed, resulting in products being passed to the FDA for approval, and the FDA and CDC giving them a pass because the principal source of money for the FDA, income, revenue, for the FDA and CDC is big pharma. They're bought and paid for.
Mm.
The CEOs, the leaders of those organizations have a revolving door to big pharma. That's their exit strategy. Their pension is to get on the board of Pfizer.
Oh,
All right?
yeah.
The whole industry is totally corrupt. And where I'm going with this is for people to appreciate that when they give you this prescription, nobody really knows now if everything that is being prescribed is safe and effective. Because there's one thing that COVID has caused to come out of the woodwork, is that nothing can be trusted anymore.
No, that's true.
And that cuts to the very core, the very essence of modern medicine, giving you pills. What can you trust? What vaccines can you trust? Maybe Kennedy and his vaccine autism theory is correct. I trashed that because the CDC said so. But now everything is on the table. And that is a very worrying time for modern medicine because trust in those institutions has evaporated. Trust in the journals has evaporated. They're all corrupt as well. They've been refusing to publish scientific reviews and articles that are counter to the narrative. I think you can appreciate how worrying it is now if you lived a life in mainstream medicine to have the rug pulled out from under you.
Yeah. Well, people do kind of rely on pills and prescriptions to be able to solve, different issues, whether it's a fatigue or maybe there's a health issue, and it seems to be treating the symptoms more than the root cause.
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, I guess the prescription in itself not only is creating other symptoms or exacerbating the root cause, but it's also in itself actually a poison or being misused in the best case scenario. I guess an example of that I'm aware of is liver failure for a lot of people that end up taking high doses of prescriptions, and that ends up being a little bit of a irreversible damage even if you start kind of phasing back on the prescriptions. So that is a testament to exactly what you were saying, as far as a lot of people not being as much of aware of the hazards, not the symptoms, but the possible adverse effects from taking a prescription for a long extended period of time.
Most pills don't work in most people. That's why when you get this prescription, your GP will use two words always that you don't understand.
And what would
and
that
the two words are, try this.
Oh.
That should be a red flag, shouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. The process of elimination is what they're going for. So they don't actually really know. It's just they're trying to diagnose it through reducing symptoms.
The new world order of therapeutics will be totally different from the way it is today. You're being given something to try because this product is designed to interact with a certain receptor in your body that has its own structure and chemical appearance that's unique to you because your genetics are different from mine. Your genes are different from mine. Your enzymes are different from mine. Your receptors are different from mine. This drug is only designed for my receptors. It will not work on your receptors. Mm. So the future of therapeutics is called the world of personalized medicine, where your genetic receptor structure is known. You are in a group of people with the same condition who are much more likely to respond to this drug because it's for your receptors and it's not for mine. That will require a mouth swab. So for non-urgent matters in the future, when these drugs get more and more refined for specific populations of people with hypertension or depression or whatever, you will have a mouth swab to identify your particular genetic composition so that we know whether you're in this group or that group or the other group.
Okay. You know, you're touching on something that I was going to bring up later, but in the interest of unscripted, I might as well bring it up now because I think what you might be touching on is I was going to ask you about what your thoughts were about the Canadian government recently requesting participation from its citizens to partake in a Canadian health measures survey. Are you familiar with that?
Yep.
Actually, can I show you a video that's right off of the Canadian government, just so the listener knows what we're talking about here? I'm going to bring this up. So this survey, let me share this with, there we go. This survey has two little videos. Let's click out of that. The first one explains what the survey is, and the other one is a video of the tour bus here. So let's play this first one here.
If you're anything like Lily, you take both your health and the health of your family seriously. And so do we. Having accurate information about the health of Canadians is an essential part of improving healthcare. That's why Statistics Canada, in partnership with Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada, is conducting the Canadian Health Measures Survey. The Canadian Health Measures Survey is a voluntary, multi-stage survey that will provide information to help guide future healthcare policies and programs. Data collected through this unique and important survey will be kept confidential.
Really?
Statistics Canada does not release any information that could identify individuals or any member of their household.
Oh no.
The time you take to participate will benefit you and your family for years to come, improving and protecting the health of all Canadians. For example, an interviewer came to Lily's home, and based on their conversation, Lily decided the Canadian Health Measures Survey was worth her time. Through her participation in the survey, Lily received important information about her health, such as body composition, cardiovascular and musculoskeletal health and fitness, oral health, nutrition and exposure to environmental contaminants. As a randomly selected participant, Lily represents many other people in her community. By saying yes to the Canadian Health Measures Survey, you will be helping to improve the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of illnesses for all Canadians. For more information about the survey, please visit.
Isn't that's right off the Statistics Canada website? What are your thoughts of this? They've got and actually they've got this other video here that show you this treatment center that goes mobile. They come right to your house, and from what I understand, they'll pay you $150 to be able to collect all these samples. So this is their mobile treatment center. And this one doesn't, I don't think, have sound in it. Oh, it does. This is a pretty elaborate setup that they have here, isn't it? I mean, look at this. So it looks like 3 units that they've got here. Anyways, so what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen this before?
Let me count the ways.
So none of this obviously is something that really has, I think, the honest intentions behind it, like what they were trying to depict in that video we just watched.
Thin end of the wedge, hyper expensive, unnecessary. What else could I say? People need to take control of their own healthcare, not rely upon government. You have a healthcare system at your disposal, your GP. If you can find one, that's another story. We do not need, underlined in neon, any more government intervention in healthcare. We need less. People have to take control of their own health, their weight, their exercise, their nutrition, the medications that they're taking or not taking, nutraceuticals, vitamin D supplementation, etc., etc. That should be the focus if they're doing anything, is to tell people to take control themselves. Exactly the opposite of this. Trust them? Are you kidding me? Trust the people that have lied to us for 3 years? Are you kidding me? It's going to be confidential. Oh, yeah. Pull the other leg.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, not only that, but they have what you were talking about as far as having the specific genetic makeup of each individual person. And I don't know what that would use. I mean, I can only assume that they'd be able to use different graphs of, different areas and regions and try and really finesse and zero in that information for whatever use. I'm not even sure what you could end up using that for, but
that should be an expense that's undertaken by Big Pharma. Iceland is a classic example of that, where just about everyone in Iceland has had their sample taken for a population-wide study for the association of particular genetic abnormalities with particular diseases.
okay.
That expense should be borne by Big Pharma because they're going to be the beneficiaries of it.
Yeah.
But it should not, underlined again in neon, be information that anyone would feel comfortable with giving to government. Government should stay out of our lives. They're far too intrusive in not just healthcare, but in general. They're corrupt, they're wasteful, and they cannot be trusted with any information that you give them. It's a leaky environment, how they store data, etc. And what's the ultimate purpose of it going to be? It could be this today and change tomorrow. Mm-hmm. No, this is a classic example of big government waste that's not going to be useful, that is dangerous, and is expensive at a time when, let's remember, this country is bankrupt. If it was a business, it would have gone under years ago.
Yeah.
We're making ends meet by borrowing money for our kids to pay back in the future with escalating interest rates. Translation: increase taxes or reduce public services or some combination thereof. This is precisely why we're in this mess. Massive government, big daddy, trying to help you when it's actually doing the opposite. It's enslaving you.
So the taking a little bit more of responsibility for your own health is kind of what you're saying with that too, instead of leaning on government and giving them all the information to be able to pretty much use it with the surface intentions of it being for your best interest, sure. But then at some point in time, that's manipulated into, well, one form of control. And we've seen, I think, over the last 3 years, how that could be manipulated in a big way.
We know in clinical medicine that it has screening in terms of an annual physical, for example. You're feeling perfectly well, you come in to see your doctor for an annual screen, questionnaire, physical examination, blood tests. Very expensive and extremely low yield. That's not to say that certain screening tests like pap smears and mammograms might have a place. I'm talking about the annual physical. Government won't pay for that anymore because it has a very low yield. Mm-hmm. So that's at a local micro level. If it doesn't work one-on-one with your own doctor, how is this going to work? The answer is it will not work. Yeah. It will just be another drag on the economy, money that has to be found to pay for these enormous trucks touring around doing absolutely dick.
That was one hell of a setup, considering that we can't even staff our own hospitals and walk-in clinics. I mean, the fuel and that whole setup is absolutely unreal. I think they're definitely, like you were saying, resources could be better spent
totally
within our own local communities and regions. I mean, this is a provincial thing from one end of Canada right to the other. That seems to be an ongoing health crisis.
I repeat, we are bankrupt.
Yeah, exactly.
We do not spend when we are bankrupt. Yeah. We cut costs when we are bankrupt. We don't increase costs when we are bankrupt. How clear does that have to be?
You make it pretty clear, that's for sure. Well, so if you're, for people who say, look at our standard of living and our healthcare system where it is today, as far as the longevity that people have and the ability to be able to control, certain health issues, whether it be I mean, I don't even want to give examples. We all know that there's endless examples that has increased the standard of living in healthcare in the country. What would you say to that when it comes to that balance between taking responsibility for your own health and investing maybe in the technology within the healthcare that allows there to be progression with an understanding within the health community for the general public?
There's too much infatuation. Look, I'm in the high-tech game. I'm CEO of a very high-tech company in North Carolina doing DNA sequencing. I understand the potential value of technology in healthcare. But I'm also a hard-headed pragmatist when it comes to the waste that's going on in the general healthcare system today for ordinary things. And I'm thinking here particularly of the infatuation with a paperless healthcare record, all electronic. I can tell you, having run big labs, chapter and verse on the electronic healthcare record, the amount of money that's being spent on hardware, training, reprogramming, downtime, etc., it does not improve healthcare. It drives costs through the sky. If I was Minister of Health, heaven forbid, because I probably wouldn't live very long. If I was Minister of Health, on day one, I would tell every hospital administrator this: look out of your window. You will see a dumpster there. I want every computer thrown in it now.
Really? Why? What's the reason for that?
As I said, expense, staffing, new programming, etc. Show me that it saves a cent. No one can do that. Instead, the costs escalate. IBM failed to computerize the NHS in Britain, having spent billions trying to do so. We need to go back to the old-fashioned... Listen, I'm not anti-progress. I'm not anti-technology.
No, for sure, yeah.
I'm a hardcore pragmatist. Let me tell you something about how it really works, just in one little example.
Sure.
The hospital chart, okay?
Yeah.
I used to run a big lab cranking out results for the chart for doctors to see. Now, it used to be that in my lab, there used to be individual pieces of equipment that would crank out a report on a piece of paper with a peel-off way of putting it in the chart, sequentially, so that you saw the change day by day. It actually employed people to do that, to stick it in the chart.
Oh.
It went up by a courier from the lab to the ward. And it was all color coordinated. So if you wanted to see hematology, it was pink. All the pieces were pink. If you wanted to see microbiology, all the pieces were green. And it was all sequentially stuck in this file.
Okay.
So when the clinician does his rounds and he wants to know this particular result, he would go...
It's like an index.
He would go to the color and he would immediately have that information within seconds.
Gotcha.
What happens now? You get an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with black print on it, with no emphasis that's obvious in terms of the particular test that you want to see. You have to read down the list to find it. It creates extra time for the physician to access the information they want to use. Translation, cost.
It's having the opposite effect of what they're trying to solve.
Exactly.
Wow. That's definitely not a commonly understood
utterly
element.
Useless. I've run big labs. I know that of which I speak. All right?
Yeah.
The
No,
infatuation
I
with the...
think that half an hour longer overview we did at the beginning explains that, doesn't it?
The infatuation with the electronic record is just a great big money sink. And no one has ever done a study to show that it's useful. Certain situations, yes. For example, you go to the emergency department, and this is what actually happens. They look up your record, and they can find information historically that can be useful to your presentation today, right now, in the emergency room. Yes, without any question. But does that offset the enormous cost of doing everything that way? No. Why? Because if they want to know that test today, you simply run it again today.
Well, I don't see it being all that much efficient anyways, because I know that there are a lot of people that end up going for blood work and they end up waiting for a long time. It depends on the area, but 2-3 weeks before they get their test results. So I guess the idea of being digital and that ability to be able to transfer from one person to the other, or department or lab or whatever have you, or even having that file transferred electronically if people are moving, isn't quite as efficient as you might think, because obviously that would represent in quicker result times and turnovers. But you're having the opposite effect from what I'm hearing from you.
It also exposes you to the risk of that information somehow being hacked.
Yeah.
If it was hard copy paper,
Yep.
you can't easily steal that.
Exactly.
And reveal it. The whole confidentiality is much more difficult to handle with an electronic system. And the big point is, it's not effective, and it's expensive, and we're broke.
Yeah. Expensive, and it's not efficient, which cause more costs and more convoluted.
Now that's a microcosm of the waste that's going on in healthcare. That's a little example of how you could slash costs in just one aspect, the diagnostic side of medicine.
Have you thought of writing a book maybe, and highlighting and trying to, chronically order or put down in order some of the areas that need improvement, pepper it with, I think, obviously some areas that really are positive aspects of the healthcare system, and put your point of view down so that people can read it, or do you think there'd be an interest with that? Or?
Well, life's too short. I've got so many other things that I'm doing, I'm afraid. It's difficult for one person to be so diffuse and tackle different things. I'm putting my effort into what I call big stuff. Big stuff. Tobacco is big stuff. Big pharma is big stuff. The independence movement of Alberta is big stuff. I'm being pulled every which way, and I'm trying to focus my limited resources on things that I can think can be
manage
useful.
it. Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to pharma, could we kind of go back a little bit and touch on the COVID crisis here, and when you thought, or when you started to realize or knew that something was not right, that it was being manipulated? Like, we went from something where nobody really knew what was going on to now all of a sudden, in that period of time, it was the only way out was through a vaccination, and that was it. And in that moment, where did you start to realize that something wasn't right, especially alarming, and to the point of where you felt like you had to speak out because you had an understanding of really what was going on? What did that look like for you? Like, what moment, or what transition to where you went from, what are we playing with, to this is definitely not being handled properly?
Right from the get-go. From the very first mandates, masks, social distancing, sanitizers, etc., before the vax was even being distributed. It's not that I'm brilliant or special. It's mainstream, hardcore, established medicine that this stuff was known not to work. Even Fauci has said in prior epidemics, influenza epidemic, that masks don't work. It was well known by everyone that none of the stuff they were proposing worked. It didn't take much for me to stand up and say what was already known. It wasn't my intuition or intelligence or anything. It was simply common knowledge. I simply stood up and said it.
It's different when someone obviously sees things and they've got critical thinking abilities to say, this just isn't right. You know, I mean, some of the stuff that was being said is just wildly absurd. You know, one mask doesn't work, let's throw a second one on there. And not only should we do that, but we should have that while we're having sex. And while we're on that, you know, our top doctors telling us to go to glory holes. I mean, there was just such a disconnect that it was so obvious that you were really starting to question the theories. But when that's from, I think, most people's perspective, but when it comes from, you know, a position like yourself where there's a deeper understanding, you know, with the vaccine and the medical system in itself, it takes on a little bit of a different meaning to it. Not that I think it's coming from a place where someone's trying to say, I know everything about it and the nuance, but it gives it a different perspective. You know what I mean? Especially when it's coming from somebody who's in the medical profession, and if they're speaking against the mainstream narrative and they're being attacked for it and their livelihood now is being threatened because of it, I mean, it should cause people to pause long enough and say, what exactly is trying to be said here? Because I don't think this person is doing it for the, you know, the health, you know, the higher purpose of themselves. You know what I mean? So there is a bit of a different perspective when it comes from someone like yourself versus, you know, everyday Canadians that are seeing these red flags, so to speak. So what was that for you? Was it the same kind of red flags most people seen, or?
Well, I'm obviously privileged, having had a traditional medical education, and I'm very proud of that. I've got a lot of achievements under my belt, and I've had a lot of experience. But I didn't really need all that in order to figure this out, as most physicians should have been able to do. Most physicians followed the government directive. Their colleges, of course, were instrumental in that. Mm-hmm. The elephant in the room now, when you close that consulting room door and you think it's just you and your doctor in that room, there's a third party. It's called the elephant in the room, government in the room, telling your doctor what to do and what not to do and what's expensive and what can be afforded, etc., etc. Government is your new doctor. Be worried. Be very worried. Because government has shown that it cannot be trusted to be the elephant in the room. They have their own agenda. The people that staff these ministries, they're not the sharpest knife in the drawer, let's put it mildly. They got there because they're brown nosers. They're looking for their pension. They're not necessarily expert in anything. Drunk on power and afraid of losing their pension. So they follow the instruction of the guy next above them. And that's how this whole thing got started. You don't have to look any further, in my opinion. I don't go down the genocide route at all. Conspiracy theories I've got absolutely no time for. What I do believe happened with this mad episode in human history is simply Occam's razor in action. The simplest explanation is probably the most likely one. Look no further than stupidity and greed. If you're running some small department, Ministry of Health in Alberta, Ministry of Health in British Columbia, a small department lacking in internal expertise, and you get someone telling you from CDC and FDA to do this with their massive, historically pure reputation, the natural reaction is, don't trouble me with the details. They've done the due diligence. Yeah. It takes time and money Thank you very much. That's what we'll do too. Copycat. One of the main reasons anything is done anywhere in any industry is very simply stated. Everyone else is doing it. So it must be okay.
It must be all right. Yeah.
So that's where the stupidity kicks in. The greed kicks in with Big Pharma, giving unfettered access to billions of people internationally with no risk of prosecution. So if you factor in stupidity and greed, that's all you need to see how things happened over the last 3 years.
When you say stupidity, what are you implying with that term though? Like these people that, because the assumption now, and I know we used that earlier, but the assumption would be that these people are obviously educated and in a position that they're in for a reason. I mean, it is not a rigorous, like there's quite a dedication to going to school and getting this education to be able to be qualified to, be these people that we're looking for advice when it comes to the nursing and the doctors.
Generally speaking, public health is the easiest speciality to get in medicine. All right?
Really? Wow.
Yes. And you end up in a bureaucracy that's otherwise known as a pension if you're good enough for long enough. So you have people in there who are not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer, who are obedient public servants waiting for their pension. Those are not the leaders that you would expect to stand up and be counted.
Difference between education and schooling, I guess.
They're captives.
Yeah.
They get to their position of power by constantly brown-nosing to the person on the rung of the ladder above them. Exactly the same in universities. That's why wokeism is so rampant in universities. Self-perpetuating elite that we are paying for to eat us alive from the inside.
Wow. It's alarming a little bit, isn't it? It's an insightful perspective that you don't hear all that often, ever, really.
Well, let's
at all.
Let's look at universities for a minute. Let's be a little bit more specific. Universities are not there to aid society in doing things better, whatever. Education is not the purpose of universities. Universities are there as a business. They get government money, they get grants from Big Pharma and other organizations to do useless research as a self-perpetuating money mill for a department. The students are there merely as bums in seats to justify the revenue stream. It doesn't really matter what society needs. Do we really need departments of transgender studies, for example? There are so many people being trained for things that have no jobs at the end of it. Departments are there as self-perpetuating elites. When you do surveys of junior faculty of any Western university, you find that 90% of junior faculty are rampant socialists, if not closet communists. And so there's a nudge and a wink when you go to university that you better buy into this philosophy if you want good grades. I've seen it myself. And so these people get kicked out, inculcated, and they become teachers and lawyers and judges and doctors and whatever. But it's the teachers I'm concerned about. They kick out teachers that go into the schools. The schools, those teachers inculcate the children in exactly the same socialist philosophy. Those kids go to university and they get a second dose. Hey, it must be right, mustn't it? And my grades depend upon it, by the way. And so you create that mill for 20 years, and you've infiltrated society with woke ideas.
Yeah.
At every level, the C-suites, the politicians, the judges, the doctors, the people that matter in terms of running society. It's been a stealth attack on democracy by a self-perpetuating elite that simply want to get their philosophy out there, and it's been incredibly successful. Hats off to Soros. Brilliant strategy, a stealth attack on democracy.
Yeah, that's becoming a lot more apparent, isn't it? Like, I think it feels like most people are becoming a little bit more aware of it. You're hearing a lot more than just yourself. There are many people that are speaking to this. I mean, one of the more pronounced ones, whether you like him or not, I mean, Jordan Peterson is
Absolutely.
dealing with this specific thing right now with the university, and they're taking, he's not able to practice, and the whole 9 years that he's going through. And that's right from the get-go. I think what launched him into, the trajectory that he went in is because that's the exact factor he was fighting, is the wokenism in the universities, and they were trying to muzzle him.
And the way you solve that is very simple. In the short term, it'll take 20 years to recover. But you've got to act radically, immediately. And you do it very simply. You turn off the spigot. The money. You turn off the spigot. Now, what's the reaction to that going to be? There'll be a wailing and gnashing of teeth that you're attacking the very bastion of freedom of speech and whatever, academic freedom. If there's anything to be learned from modern politics, it's when someone is accusing you of doing something, you can guarantee that they are doing exactly the same. So you turn off the spigot because they're trying to influence free speech. We've seen it everywhere on campuses, haven't we?
Yeah.
They will accuse the people turning off the spigot as something that is inhibiting free speech.
Yeah.
When it is exactly them that's been inhibiting free speech.
Just in the act of them doing that is the exact, they're doing the same thing they're trying to accuse other people of doing.
Right. So as I'm turning off the spigot, I would say to them, bring it on. Because you know what? You're all fired. And we will hire back those that we want to have in these positions of influence of our future and our children. And if you don't like it, we won't hire you. Because we've got in our back pocket 5,000 South Africans who are just lusting to come here for a better life. And they will be buying into those basic freedoms of democracy that you have been trashing. So make your mind up.
The spigot and this money that you're talking about, where you need to curb that. You mentioned earlier that it's coming from the government also. I mean, this is a lot of it being government funding. And so that needs to obviously be, going back to, I guess, the healthcare analogy, don't treat the symptom, go at the root cause. So politics, if that's the source of a lot of this funding, and that control now is coming from the government because you're dependent on their funding, it would only make sense that would probably be where the source that you want to be able to change. So what would you recommend people do to be able to make that change? Am I kind of following that right?
Sure.
There? Okay. So
it's very simple. If anyone thinks that all these institutions can be changed materially by being nice and arguing for it and begging Ottawa to do what it can locally here within the boundaries of Alberta, if anyone thinks that is going to succeed, you are dreaming in Technicolor. It is fatuous to expect any material change on the ground here in Alberta by asking for negotiation with the federal government. The only way to transform society along its democracy, along the traditional lines that we're all familiar with, the only way is to take control of our own destiny by declaring independence from Ottawa and being a sovereign country. Then we can burn these institutions down to the studs, if I could borrow a phrase from Paul Alexander, and rebuild them along the traditional lines that was intended in the first place. We cannot tinker with this problem. It will fail. Radical change is the only way we're going to take back control of democracy and have the people in control. Not these idiocrats, as I call them. No, they're just brown noses looking for their pension, drunk on power and with unlimited ability to spend your money. How many people are aware that when you add all the taxes up that you have to pay to government in its many and various forms, some of which are heavily disguised, including the carbon tax, how many people out there are aware that an average family spends 45% of its working life sending money to government to waste on your behalf? Almost half your life is spent working for government.
I think that's a pretty common understanding. I mean, it's not hard to see your paycheck getting slashed by taxes, and then everything you buy is taxed. And we were just talking about that with our natural gas bill, because it was one of the first times I looked at all the line items underneath, and you have the consumption of our natural gas, and then it was taxed, and then that was as a subtotal. And then they added a bunch of other, fees in there, which were taxed again, but they were all the same taxes that we were just charged on the previous line item. So the taxes were layered, and we averaged it to be about a third consumable product, and 2/3 were taxes.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, the taxes is just overwhelming, and you see that now with the carbon tax you mentioned, reflecting, right into everything, the cost of living and inflation and everything else. I think it's funny when inflation goes up and the cost of just about every product out there goes up. And there are two instances that I can remember where all of a sudden people were affected directly. The first time was fuel. I remember Horgan, our BC Premier at the time, was shutting off, pipelines and whatnot, and the price of fuel went through the roof. And then he did an investigation into oil and gas companies because he thought it was overcharging. And he was like, well, you just shut off the pipeline. And then there again with Jagmeet Singh, doing an investigation into supermarkets because he's wondering why the price of food is so high. Well, you just are getting when inflation goes up and the cost of goods go up, that's right across the board. And it's due to taxes, and the carbon tax is one of the leading factors in driving inflation. You pay more taxes, things cost more. It gets passed on to the consumer. I think most people understand those basic, principles when it comes to taxes. Less taxes promote, people to be able to thrive and growth. More taxes stifle it. Very common, and I get what you're saying with that. It does make sense. I hope it makes sense for most people. The alarming part of it is the extent that we need to be able to go to be able to correct this. Burning down to the stakes.
The studs.
Studs. Whew.
Obviously not simultaneously on day one. There needs to be a sequence of events. It has to be well studied. Whatever you're putting in its place has to be better, obviously. It's going to take time. But you're right. We are looking at decades worth of work to achieve that end. It would not happen immediately.
Do you find now, though, because more people are being affected with the cost of living and just kind of the global turmoil and the environment and everything that seems to be going on, are people starting to become a little bit more aware as far as wanting to engage a little bit more into politics or other aspects of life?
No. People are now flapping their flippers that they don't have to wear a diaper on their face. They think their freedom has returned. Wait for the first jet to go down because of subclinical myocarditis in a pilot, of which we've seen 7 events over the last 3 months. People need to wake up to the fact that just because you don't have to wear a bloody diaper on your face does not mean that life has returned to any semblance of normal. Not at all. Government is still determined to control you. People must realize that we as citizens should be controlling government, not the other way around. There should be recall of premiers and prime ministers. We should have the ability with referenda to decide what we want to be the laws, like they do, for example, in Switzerland. That's true democracy, when we have influence on policy immediately, not waiting for 4 years for some child emperor to bumble along and sell us out to China. No, we want to take back control of every aspect of our lives because we, the citizens, are in control, not that lot. They got there because of greed and stupidity. Let's remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that there are any options on the political spectrum that would be an alternative to, the government that's currently in play, or what does that look like? I'm trying to picture how a guy would go about making those changes.
People have to be made much more angry than they are now. So I say this, if the child emperor is listening, when he's not having a seance with his stepfather in Cuba, I say to the child emperor, please make it worse. Please make it worse. Because only by making it worse will people wake up to the gravity of what's underway. And then we would hopefully see people willing to sign a referendum for independence of the province of Alberta from Canada, the Republic of Alberta. Only by taking control of the basic institutions of democracy is there any hope for this province, the Albertans, to regain what we once had. We have to take back total control by being an independent state. And we can only do that if sufficient people get angry enough to sign a referendum demanding it. That's a lot of work. Because it takes...
Yeah, it is. I think Quebec has been trying to do that now for quite some time now.
Well, remember, they only fail by 1%. Yeah. We need 600,000 signatures within 3 months of the referendum being public. That requires a lot of groundwork, a lot of education ahead of time.
So what would have to be in place as far as checks and balances for something like what we're in right now to just repeat? But, after, let's say this goes through and you get the independence now, was stopping the whole cycle to kind of start all over again?
Yeah, there's a danger, obviously, of it simply being reinvented. There would have to be checks and balances. But give me that risk anytime over enduring this current oppression, which it is, massive oppression, in terms of freedoms, in terms of economics. How do you educate your children? Where can you travel? When can you travel? When can you associate? When can you protest? How can you protest? If I had the option of balancing the risk of a new version of democracy abusing us in the same way versus experiencing the continuation of this and getting worse, give me the risk of the future anytime.
Mm-hmm. Wow. But yeah, there would have to be certain checks and balances in place, though, because to be able to have something repeat and then fracture down into something smaller, and that repetitive, humans seem to be victim of being able to repeat themselves. Like, we don't seem to learn a lesson, and life gets good, people don't get involved, and right. You get back into that same old cycle. Just wondering if
one of the best ways of having checks and balances is having recall. Recall. You don't like what your premier's doing. Enough of you get together and say so, and he's turfed.
that involves people actually staying engaged, though. And I think that's part of why things got shifted over to where we are now. Life got so good that people had a schedule that's so heavy and the workload's so high that nobody had the time. And until, it started to affect them directly. And then now all of a sudden they're trying to learn, and it might be, a little bit too late. And you get back into that cycle where now the people who made those changes and have that understanding and of the system and fully engaged create. Well, I mean, people use that cycle all the time. Good times create weak people create bad times create, hard people, and you get that cycle. And that's the human nature I'm talking about, where you're just going to solve a problem, but then it's going to have a history of getting back into the same cyclical pattern.
People are so busy now. 2-job families.
Yeah. That's
all kinds of pressures,
huge.
Kids' hockey games, etc., etc. The carrot that is being dangled in front of everyone right now is very simply described. It's called convenience. Look, we can make your life even more comfortable. All you have to do is sign on to digital currency. It's going to make your life so much more convenient and simple. You don't need paper money in your pocket anymore. It's all virtual. It's going to be so simple. It's very convenient, isn't it? But the flip side is, we gotcha. We can turn off the spigot at your bank anytime we want. If you're traveling too far, if your carbon footprint is too extensive, etc., etc., the 15-minute city, etc., etc., they gotcha. They gotcha under the guise of it simply being an easier, more convenient life. Lazy people will go for that. That's the danger.
That's true. And I think an example of that is if you just look back a little bit further, and it kind of actually is touching on a little bit about what you were talking about, in the healthcare system with computers, for an example. We have all these conveniencies and niceties to be able to make life a lot easier. But why is it now every time we have a smartphone and all these extra tools at our disposal, our schedules and our workload go up? It has the opposite effect, doesn't it? I mean, back in the day when you had a horse and buggy, I mean, it was definitely labor intensive. I don't want to take that away, but it seemed to be where everyone's looking back on the simpler way of life, right? And every time you put something in there to be able to make your life easier, it does seem to have a little bit of the opposite effect on things, doesn't it? It just adds more of a workload, more of a requirement.
Let's look at how millennials live right now. So long as they have a water bottle, here's one.
Yeah.
So long as they have a water bottle, an iPhone for selfies, and go home for Netflix, life is peachy, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
The nanny state will look after you if whatever happens that's unfortunate. Don't worry, we're here to look after you. So continue with your hedonistic swirl down the drain, looking purely at yourself. Ignore society. And if you do that, be careful of what you wish for, because that dystopian future where you're exchanging convenience for control, that dystopian future is coming at you like a train with your name on it. This isn't theory anymore. These plans are being laid internationally. They're being exercised in certain countries like the Netherlands, for example. The Bank of England is talking seriously about digital currency. These are not theories. Control is coming like a freight train in your general direction. And when it hits you, it's going to be too late.
I think, though, when you're trying to explain a lot of like what you were just saying, because you mentioned earlier that you're not into conspiracy theories, but it depends on who you're talking to, because something like that could be explained as a conspiracy theory. And I want to follow up with a little bit on that.
But it's not a theory; it's happening.
And I think what people perceive to be a conspiracy theory 6 months down the road is a reality, and we've seen that over the last 3 years, where I don't think many people even paid much attention to the World Health or WEF and a lot of these, unelected entities. And now it's just almost like a perceived acceptance on globalism. We went from 2 years ago, that was an conspiracy theory. It really was. You say globalism and you start talking like that, people, they back right up. But now it's a completely different animal.
It was a stealth attack on democracy that's been brilliantly successful. One of the wonderful things about COVID was it flushed out the enemy, wokeism. Mm-hmm. We now know who the enemy is. You can't fight a war if you don't know who the enemy is. The enemy is now out there for all to see. The emperor has no clothes. A much easier target.
Well, what is that then, though? Because that's, I think, what is hard to distinguish is where, like on a conspiracy theory, it's pretty hard to be able to kind of distinguish the reality of something and an actual conspiracy theory a lot of the time, especially when people are starting to become a little bit more desensitized to that. That word is being thrown around pretty willy-nilly, so to speak, and it's shocking on how things are transitioning without actually being caught. You know what I mean? It went from a conspiracy theory to where, yeah, this is the way it is and it's for our best interest. And so where does that rabbit hole take you if you go too far? And how do you recognize that as maybe something you shouldn't go down, but maybe you need to pay attention to a little bit more in other areas? How do you just, especially with all the information we have to filter through?
These are not conspiracy theories. This is fact. Soros is bragging about having placed his acolytes in the cabinets of countries, that he controls the Canadian cabinet by virtue of having attended WEF and having gone through their leadership programs. That strategy was brilliantly successful. The stealth attack on democracy under our noses.
Yeah,
that's not a conspiracy theory.
That's
not. Fact.
It isn't, and it is crafted very. They're not. It's a very intelligent. Like, these people aren't stupid.
Nope.
I mean, to assume that is definitely not accurate. Are you familiar with the WEF website and how to navigate that, though?
No.
So when you have hard fact, what are you looking at as like the hard fact? Just the direction that we're going in, or what is something tangible that we can say, look, this is actually something that is very alarming that supports the globalism?
Well, I mean, one of the things that our rulers, in the medieval sense, our rulers realized in COVID is that you can be controlled. Mm-hmm. If there's a sufficiently efficient fire hosing of propaganda 24/7 with the media bought and paid for, with no other access to information, because most people don't listen to your podcast or read anything other than mainstream stuff.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay?
Yeah.
They're smart people. They have bought communication to the general public. Only one narrative is provided. And Joe Blow, Susie Q, that's all they have. They used to trust government. They've got no reason now not to trust government because they've not heard any other story. So we'll continue trusting government because they're trustworthy, aren't they?
Yeah. You want me to answer that? No, that's an oxymoron for sure. I mean, going back to, with the convoy, I think that did actually expose a lot, though. It will get worse to be able to expose and flush out, I think, the underlying cause of what's going on. And I know a lot of people are very unhappy with how the government reacted, and I agree with that. The flip side of that, though, is that what you're talking to or you're speaking about is the fact that all of this actually happened, and it was on for everybody to see. That Emergency Act was enacted, and what happened actually did happen, and the way it was done was so wrong. I know they did an inquiry that sided with it, but if you just look at it in snapshots where, peaceful protests did take place, the Prime Minister incited a bunch of rhetoric without engaging in a positive way at any single time, never left the scene, Ottawa or Ontario, and came back and decided that it was illegal, and the only way to be able to take care of it was to invoke the Emergencies Act that had, a very violent, destructive approach on it all, and everybody's seen it. And that's the thing, is that everybody's seen it.
Well, the child emperor had a séance every evening with his stepdaddy. And his stepdaddy, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, not his real daddy, his stepdaddy was telling the child emperor, Justin, remember what I said? Just watch me. Just watch me. Just do it, Justin. You'll get away with it. The guy's got nothing between the ears. Anyone that voted for that clown was voting for a hairstyle, a name, and good looks. Not that I'm any fan of Harper's, but that campaign slogan, he's not ready, did that ever turn out to be true? A child emperor pretending to be a prime minister. But where I was going with the very fortunate declaration of wokeism during the COVID madness and the control that resulted from it. Now that the COVID episode, for most people, they think it's over, which is not true, obviously. All kinds of other things are going to happen that were started because of the government's intervention. What COVID demonstrated to government was, as I said, you can be controlled. The next big influence on our lives, as if it wasn't there already, but it's going to be massively fanned, is, of course, climate change.
Yeah.
They have shown you can be controlled. If we pump out the propaganda 24/7 on climate change, that's their next objective. The redistribution of wealth under the guise of colonial exploitation of the developing world. That's coming, and that will further diminish the quality of life because of the expense and the inconvenience associated with a lot of it. What the implementation of climate change policies really means, that for democracy in decay, the rate of decay will accelerate. We are killing ourselves under this fatuous idea that somehow we've been exploiting the environment and carbon dioxide is the poison for the rest of the world. While we are diminishing our quality of life and making ourselves weaker, bankrupt, unaffordable healthcare, poor schooling, that's going to get worse because of the increased debt that we will be incurring and the servicing of that debt. While we are killing ourselves, we are seeing China in the ascendancy, building 2 or 3 coal plants every week, using coal that we export from Vancouver. The hypocrisy of that needs to sink in. So while we are in decay, following this mad path of having to address climate change, which is a fiction in itself, China is in the ascendancy. And sooner or later, those curves are going to cross. And it will be the Chinese that determine when to pull the trigger. We are weary of war. We have no will to resist. We're infatuated with our water bottle and our Netflix and our selfies. and we are ripe for the picking. They are laughing themselves silly in China. People need to remember some of those principles of medieval warfare. You don't feed your enemy. There should be a general mantra that everyone lives by. It's called ABC. Anywhere but China. You don't feed your enemy. Making them stronger, making them in charge of when to attack you. You don't do that. You starve them to death. When's that going to sink in?
Well, when I think how China and our consumables are so intertwined right now that to be able to separate the two of them is... We've seen that just with the chips in our vehicles.
No. Trump, before he so-called lost the election, it was my first realization because of Trump saying this, that 90%, that was the start of it, 90% of our pharmaceuticals come from China in either bulk form or finished form. 90%. Our future enemy is the provider of pills for our healthcare system. Now that should scare people right off the bat. But what Trump realized was that he should expand on that idea and try to repatriate as much manufacturing as possible from China to other countries that were more dependable or the States itself. That was underway when he lost the election, and I'm sure if he wins again, that will come back with a vengeance, because we have to start making stuff ourselves. The strength of an economy is not based upon the provision of exotic services like banking and insurance and financial this and that. No. The strength of an economy is based upon making stuff, things you can hold. That's the strength of an economy. Mm-hmm. And if the economy is not strong, you can't afford healthcare and education, etc., etc. You have to have a strong economy. And you have to make stuff to be a strong economy. We're living in a very artificial economy right now. We're making virtually nothing. We're outsourcing it all.
Yeah, we are. The only thing we really have is auto industry in Ontario, and natural resources throughout pretty much and farming, of course, but that's definitely, farming isn't really manufacturing either.
Well, look at what's happening in the Netherlands. Farming's under attack now.
Because, yeah, exactly.
Because cows are farting, aren't they?
Yeah. Here's an interesting fact. I know some of the Hutterites that are around here right now that are encountering issues with the government coming. They're in the middle of a legal battle over a few different things, but they're tackling the water. But then they're also wanting to address the fact that they need to be able to pay a carbon tax on how many cows they have because of, I guess, the methane that they're emitting into the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas. So they have to pay taxes because a cow is farting enough that's creating methane, and that's contributing to the deterioration of our climate. Pretty wild, and it's not cheap. It's sometimes people think taxes are just a very small cost. Mm. We touched on earlier, I have a bill I can show you that where 2/3 of that bill are specifically taxes.
Right.
So it is a very effective way of being able to. Something else about the food, and I don't want to go too far into their food. As far as what they're feeding him, because I don't know a lot about it. This is through just a conversation I had with him just a little while ago. But they're being regulated on what they're feeding their cattle now. And it's supposed to curb how much these cattle are farting and emitting methane into the atmosphere. But the first thing that I think of is if you're changing their diet, which is going to affect their digestive tract enough to where they're not actually able to function proper, to reduce, that byproduct of methane, I guess. What's that doing to the animal? And then, of course, what is that going to end up doing to the end user, being us who are eating that meat? I mean, it's going to saturate. We all know how hormones affect cattle. So these are things that I want to dig into a little bit more, but that's just an example of where now there's a little bit more control. There's edging into, the cattle industry, the farming industry.
A little here, a little there.
Exactly.
It's a creep, isn't it? And
It is.
one day when you wake up, you have lost control.
Yeah.
Government should get out of business. Let business run business.
Yeah.
We want the food supply to be safe, obviously. We want the slaughterhouses to be well regulated, obviously. But get out of business. The business of business is business. Get out of it. We know how to run things in business. They don't. Everything they touch, they fuck up. Pardon me, rinse my mouth out. They don't understand business. Keep your nose out and we can run things. Just like we could have looked after ourselves in the COVID pandemic with that thing called common sense that we all have lots of. They should get out of trying to control every tiny little friggin' thing of life and stay with the basics. Raise taxes for basic services and then shut up and get the hell out of our lives.
Well, I agree. I agree 100% with a lot of that. This definitely went into a political realm, didn't it? I was thinking we were going to be talking about medical. Having said that, though, before we leave that spectrum a little bit and maybe pivot, we're kind of sounding an alarm a little bit on some stuff. But what does it look like now to be able to? Okay, so now we've absorbed all of this. So what do we do with that now? How do we go about doing our part to be able to bump the needle and start doing what we need to be able to make the changes that are needed?
For people that are not aware of many of these issues like we've been talking about, it's not because they're stupid, it's because they've been fire-hosed. Individuals need to explore alternative sources of information where the truth resides, empowering themselves sufficiently to get angry, to be willing to sign a referendum, to detach ourselves from the abusive relationship with Ottawa. Only by taking control of our own destiny can there be material change other than simply tinkering or making a bad situation even worse, resulting in a very dystopian future for our children. People need to get out of their cocoon, stand up, be counted, get educated, express yourself, and translate that into the political process. I'm not proposing any violent insurrection here. I want the democratic process to prevail. But only by taking individual action will there be any hope for change. And people who are in that comfort zone right now, that hedonistic swill down the drain, are they in for a big awakening? Because in a hedonistic swill down the drain, eventually you hit the bloody drain.
Yeah.
It's like going in a black hole.
Yeah.
There'll be no coming back. That's the future that we're looking at if there's inaction. So that's why I said I'm begging the child emperor to make it worse.
Well, I think it will. I mean, things don't usually get better without getting a little bit more, extreme in any kind of change. It does take things to get to a place of where it doesn't look, like there's much chance or light at the end of the tunnel. But I think also, a lot of people are making some effort to be able to engage in, one form or another that they never have before. I see it. I think I feel it. I'm an example of that with just this podcast. I'm no different than anybody else, really. I mean, I have a family, very busy. trying to be able to carve out a standard of living and a lifestyle and provide, and really didn't have any understanding of politics or even have an appetite for it, to be honest with you. It really aggravated me. You talk about politics, especially some of the wording they use that's specific to politics, constituents, that word. I mean, it bothered me. I was like, what the hell? Where else would I ever use that word? But, this is, I think, the byproduct of wanting to be able to, not only recognizing that something has to be done, but what do you do, and not knowing what to do. This is obviously the first thing that I thought I could do. And I think everybody's doing something in their own way. I don't think everybody's going to have, the same exact approach on anything. I certainly don't think everybody's going to pick up podcasting. But I think people will do whatever they can in their abilities and their strengths. And that the only common denominator, I think, in all of that is that people are going to have to reach out of their comfort zone and get into something where it's going to be very uncomfortable for a long period of time, and that uncomfortable feeling is going to last for as long as you build a new skill set in whatever it might be. And as long as it has, I think, the intentions of having some kind of influence as far as positive change or engagement with other people, because I don't think that, people lashing out of anger, it's very messy. Loss of self-control, it needs to have, I think, intentions, methodical, and with the hopes of trying to be unifying in a way for positive change or some kind of change. That's not going to be in the direction that we're going now. We have to bump the needle, and that's how you're going to have, I think, more effect in the general perception of things. As people start to, want to get engaged, they're going to be looking for something to do. And I think the unifying part and the convoy spoke to that. And I think that is a takeaway from the convoy, if anything, is that the value in unity is far more powerful than I think people actually ever thought or gave it credit for. One of the things that I realized earlier, and we seem to throw these around, and I don't know why I didn't pick up on this earlier, is, the term silent majority, or, it only is what's in any business, the smallest percentage does 50% of the work. There's all these, I think, phrases that we use. So I don't think that it's going to take an overwhelming amount of people to have the biggest amount of change.
You can get to the tipping point without having 50% really
exactly
buying into the idea.
No. It's reassuring when you see those numbers, though, that it's out of 100 people, you don't have to convince 60 people that, it's with politics, we're talking about that, and some of the people, just about everybody I talk to about the politics and how the results are, they keep saying that it's the same faces over and over again, and the difference between a majority and minority, or even nothing at all, are a very small percentage. And I think if we got 90% of the population don't even really do anything at all, so that's 10% that were left to eligible voting or general population. We just need to, I think, get another 5% of the population to be able to actually engage a little bit.
Well, what people have to think about is this: Canada was a fine experiment, but it has failed. The divorce is over. Alberta, to a large extent, is not proposing to leave Canada. Canada left Alberta a long time ago. How many times do you want to be slapped around and hope that next time is going to be different? It will not get any better without radical change in the relationship between Alberta and Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And people have to look forward to that incredible future that would offer when we take control of all the institutions, the courts, the police, the media, the banking, government, medicine, etc. What started as that incredible convoy from Atchison, Alberta, I was there when it started. That incredible moment in human history when democracy, as it's currently practiced, was being challenged by truckers. That has the opportunity now of morphing into a most glorious outcome, a redefinition of democracy, Magna Carta 2.0, where Alberta, of all places, could be a beacon for the rest of the world to reinvent democracy along the lines that we're all so familiar with, the traditional lines of democracy, where all those freedoms would return, and not only freedoms, but prosperity, perhaps to the extent of not requiring women to have a second job. They could, if they wanted to be at home, not as a diminutive role, not at all. Women have the most important role in society, and they're being forced to relinquish that, to put money on the table. Well, how wonderful it would be if women chose to stay home and look after their children, homeschool if they wanted to recreate that core family, those core traditional values. Prosperity, freedom, and being an example for the rest of the world. That is the intoxicating future that an independent Republic of Alberta holds. It's not just no transfer payments, right? It's not just tinkering with the abuse that's been going on. It's a radical new world full of incredible opportunity and excitement that's there for the grasping. We just have to do it. The divorce is over. Let's separate the assets and get on with it.
Well, that's quite the message. That's, wow, what a hell of a conversation. This is crazy. Unreal. I'm looking at the time here, and you have a speaking event tonight, and I want to make sure that we're going to have plenty of time to be able to get that. I'm just going to see how much, we're in an hour and a half. Why don't we kind of start wrapping things up here? Sure. I'd like to thank you again for coming on, because this is actually pretty cool that I was able to talk to you in person in the studio. I've been looking forward to this for some time. Really wanted to ever since we talked over the phone there some time ago to be able to touch base again. But I'd like to make sure that we don't cut it short without having the option of being able to make sure that we don't have any loose ends. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on again or clarify, or because we kind of covered a fair bit of ground there? Is there anything, in closing that you'd like to mention?
Well, my favorite scotch is...
Ooh. What's your scotch? What's your favorite scotch?
Well, if we could end on a light note, I'm experimenting right now. I'm climbing up the peat.
I can help you.
I'm climbing up the peat ladder.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any way to follow you? Is there anything you'd want to?
No, I don't have a Substack. I don't have a Facebook page.
Okay, this Substack.
I live anonymously.
What is a Substack? You got it. I hear that quite often.
It's a very personal way of posting information for people to access freely, but also the more prolific Substackers, so to speak, of which I'm not one, that you can subscribe to their Substack to help them along economically.
Like a blog?
It's like a blog. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to look into that, because I've heard that Substack. I thought Substacks were actually specific to the medical industry, to be honest with you. I didn't really know.
3 main Substacks out there. Dr. Paul Alexander, Substack. Peter Halligan, Halligan, Peter Halligan, Substack. And the Brownstone Institute. They are all free, but really depend upon subscribers, a very modest fee, in order to keep going. And I would strongly encourage everyone to consider accessing that source of information. Absolutely blue chip. The other one, of course, is Peter McCullough.
Yes.
McCullough's a bit difficult to spell, but he has his own Substack. And finally, a company in the States called The Wellness Company, TWC.
Okay.
Peter McCullough, Paul Alexander, Mark Trozzi, Julie Poiness, and myself are part of the medical board for Canada.
Oh.
And that company is about to launch 2 very exciting adventures into the Canadian healthcare space.
Really?
One is nutraceuticals that are unique to that company. One in particular, nattokinase, that may very well have tremendous potential for detoxifying those people who've been vaxxed. And the other quite different project, given the great difficulty of accessing immediate specialist opinions in Canada, there will be, on a fee-for-service basis, immediate access to specialists in the US to discuss your particular health circumstance. Not to be your treating physician, but to be that immediate third party.
A resource. Oh,
yes.
that's amazing.
That is called the Wellness Company. It has its own website, and I'd encourage everyone to
I can
visit
actually pop that up here. I just take a moment here. Wellness Company.
There
you
will be
Canada or this one here.
Yeah, there will be a Canadian website shortly.
Let's. I'm just going to show this window. There we go. This one here.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Well, there you go. I'll put this in the show notes for anyone who's curious.
This
is it here.
That is the company.
Awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'll put that in the show notes so everybody can. That's actually really natural products backed by science, healthcare without limits. Oh, look at this, eh? This is pretty well put together.
Let me just add one caveat here. It's very important. Some of these nutraceuticals are not fully proven to the extent of clinical trials. And there's the American board, people you'll recognize, Harvey Reish, Peter McCullough. But the products are safe, and they have potential for being very helpful.
Wow. I'm glad you let us know about this.
And in the absence of anything else, it's certainly worth exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Definitely. Just out of curiosity to see what this is about. Well, thank you. I want to make one little mention here of a book I just got. I got a helper here. Can you pass me? Sorry, guys. That's awesome. I just got this today, actually, a couple hours ago. This is we were talking about different books. This is from Dr. Paul Alexander. He had mentioned Paul Alexander, and he has a book here called Presidential Takedown. I got this off of Amazon. Right. I can't remember what I ended up paying for it. It's just the same price as any other book. I'm looking forward to reading this one. And anybody who is curious about who Dr. Paul Alexander is, I hope to maybe come into contact with him one day, but at the very least, read his book. Very looking forward to it. Very interesting. Have you seen that yet?
I should be a co-author of this book. I'm joking, because when we were in Ottawa, I said to Paul, listen, you know too much. There's an X on your forehead. Get a book written before they knock you off.
Yeah.
Get a ghostwriter to write it for you. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, there you go.
And
flip that around so people can see it.
Not only is that important, document, because he was center stage with Fauci and Birx and Trump, but it is a source of income for Dr. Alexander. He's lost his position.
Yeah.
And he needs to sell books. He needs people to subscribe to his website, his Substack, and create a modest income for himself that he's lost.
Well, I'm glad we're able to touch on that. It's very important. And anybody who's curious about that book too, along with that website that we were just looking at there, I think what I'll do is put a link to that book in my show notes for anybody who's curious about it too. It'll be real easy to find. I mean, just Google it on Amazon. That's how I found it, and it was the first thing that popped up. But no, it's going to be an interesting read. I'm curious to get into that one there. Like I said, I've had it in my possession for like literally a couple hours. My wife just picked it up, so.
And I'll ask Paul if he'd be willing to do a podcast.
It was so awesome. Oh, there's going to be a lot of whiskey I owe you then, won't it? Well, it was a pleasure. I'm glad to have been able to chat with you like this, and hopefully we'll be able to stay in touch, follow up down the road and see how things are going. And until then, take care.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Take care.